Welcome retro gaming emulated handheld supporters. We have all heard of the company Retroid, and this time around with their latest release they have taken a couple of steps back from their flip screen model 3 and 3 Plus and revisited the second model for a lovely upgraded revision. Personally, I am a big fan of the second model and the Plus upgrade, as the second was the first handheld I got my hands on when it comes to retro gaming emulation, and now I'm pretty much hooked. I've been excited about the release of the 2S, as the second one was a great product but just really needed some design and build quality touch-ups. Well, here the 2S is apparently here to do just that. If we haven't met, my name is Jay from Sprite.co.uk. I'm not sponsored, affiliated at all by Retroid, but I do love me some retro gaming on the go. So let's check this out. First of all, the packaging design is really nice actually compared to some of the competition out there. As we open this up, we do have a screen protector, which is always good, and some promo pamphlet. Seems to have some type of print error on mine. That's a bit of a shame, but it is printed with some gloss ink finish. On the reverse we have a simple button guide layout, very nice touch. Nothing underneath the packaging casing, but we do have a nicely built USB-C cable that is placed under the console with some holding clips. Great job. And that's about it to the packaging side of things. And now for the Retroid Pocket 2S. And already I do find this pretty lovely to hold in my hand, especially compared to the Retroid Pocket 2. I went for the clear green model. As you can see here, I do love me some retro transparent style casing. There is quite a fair bit going on here when it comes to this upgrade. It does feel great, and the plastic holding does seem to have a smooth finish, but not the type that is a magnet to keeping fingerprints and grub stains on it. Well, to really understand what is going on with this upgrade, I think let's head straight to a comparison with the original Retroid Pocket 2. As you can see with these handhelds side by side, they are identical to when it comes with the size and build shape. As we can see on the top, the power button, volume dials, USB-C and mini HDMI layout is all the same, and they're built with those micro switches. The top bumper buttons and triggers are again built the same design and layout, with L1 and R1 as micro switches, and then the L2 and R2 when it comes to the original Retroid Pocket 2 is micro switched again with a little trigger point. But this time when it comes to the RP2S, this is where the upgrade comes in with an analog trigger. It does have a very nice travel and is great for you racing gaming fans out there. A feature people have been requesting for quite a long time, and it's finally nice to see. Definitely a improvement. The next improvement will be the D-pad. I've never been a fan of the original D-pad for the Retroid Pocket 2. It has a squishy and a non-precise feel. But now with the 2S, we have that PSV Vita style that was being brought over from the 3 and the flip model. Personally, for a portable handheld, this D-pad design is one of my favourites. With the 2 and the 2 Plus model, I was always using that analog input. The right hand side otherwise I just considered useless, really poor design in my taste. But as it was placed on the left hand side on the top, I found it always really worked well for me, and is my personal favourite layout. It's a shame they swapped this design around for the 2S. But now for the RP2S, we have an upgraded Hall censored analog stick with a concave design, with a minor further travel distance from the sides, feeling more like a traditional gaming console controller analog stick. For the right hand side they are just identical, which is just a given design, as if they would have stuck with that slider right stick, me and Retroid will be having some issues. With the main front facing buttons, they now have such a very minor further travel compared to the Retroid Pocket 2, and I would say are ever so slightly bigger, but more like a traditional gaming controller, which is definitely an improvement in my opinion. It's just a shame that they don't have a gloss finish, as it does come across a bit of a cheap feel. As we do now have an additional start and select button on top of this handheld, the bottom 3 buttons are a little bit different, but they are built the same with the micro switches. We have a home button, a back button, and then an M1 button, which you can assign this to other via the handheld settings. The SD card slot I do find a lot better, as that flimsy rubber cover has now been replaced by a firm plastic clip and a rubber tie, and I do find when inserting SD cards a lot more sturdy. Both the SD card slot and that very handy audio input has now been placed slightly left to the handheld this time. Here's a quick comparison now with the Retroid Pocket 2 next to the 2S and the RP3 and RP3 Plus Metal Edition. When it comes to the third edition, it does add a couple of inches to the width, as you can see. Well, you can now really tell that the D-pad is exactly the same as the third model, but with that complete new design of the Hall sensored analog stick. And then heading to the settings menu, you can tell there is no dead zone at all with these analog sticks. Now let's do a quick comparison with the specs. There are some similarities with the original 2 Plus model and this new 2S. We do have the same battery capacity of 4000 milliamps. We do have 32GB built in both of these handhelds, with the standard 2S model, both of them having a 3.5 screen with a 640 by 480 resolution, with both the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth being version 5.0. The processors are the same Unisoc Tiger, but the 2 having a 3-ARM Cortex A55, with the 2S now having 6 times Cortex A55, clocked at the same speed. The GPU with the 2 Plus having a Power VR 800MHz, and the 2S having a better performing Mali G52 MP2 with 614MHz. The OS has been updated as well, coming from version 9, now we're on to version 11. Now when picking up the 2S direct from their website, they do have 2 variants. First of all, let's price up the standard 3GB of RAM and 32GB of storage version, which this all works out to $132, which is about £106 with that decent shipping applied. Or you can choose the 4GB RAM version with 128GB of storage, which then works out about $152 or £122. When it comes to choosing the colour of your handheld, Retroid have always been great with their variants. We have a 16-bit version, we have the black version, and then we have the retro version with those Game Boy Color buttons, and then we got our indigo version, much like the GameCube color, and then we have the clear transparent black, which does look pretty awesome. But of course I went with a transparent green, and I can safely say that this is a welcome addition to the Retroid Pocket family. When setting up your new Retroid Pocket 2S, this is a right doddle, and it's great for newbies to jump on board with. Set this up, just keep pressing the R1 to progress, set your correct time zone, and of course we want to access Google Play features to download all those Android games. You could uncheck this if you like to utilize the RAM usage. Then you can select the apps that you like to include. For my personal usage and just testing purposes, I'm going to go for Dolphin to run your GameCube titles, Dolphin Handheld as well. Then we got DuckStation to run PlayStation 1 games, D-pad test just to test the controller for obvious reasons, and then we got M64 Plus for N64 games, and PPSSP for PSP of course, then Redream for Dreamcast. And of course you will need RetroArch to get all those older school retro games running. I'm gonna check Splunky just for funsies. Then we have Yabu Sensiro to run Saturn games, then Aether SX2 to run PlayStation 2 games. The last thing you choose is just the startup launcher. You have 2 to choose from, and then you're all done and ready. I'll sort out the Wi-Fi later. Now setting this up can take a while depending on your experience with these handhelds, but when you're done I'm sure it is all worth it. I won't go into too much detail about this section of this video, as this will end up quite a long video. But when setting this up, it does like to hold your hand throughout the experience, so I won't worry too much about that. What I recommend doing first of all is updating those apps via the Play Store first. One thing to note with the 32GB model is that the Android OS alone takes over 10GB of storage, but the Retroid will have no other bloatware installed, which is pretty awesome. To upgrade to the latest firmware when they do release these, Retroid do include an OTA found in the settings menu, and then clicking on Advanced, and we are now currently on 1.037. Personally, I have found Retroid OS and the front end a better experience than the current market competitor, Anbernic. This is just my opinion, and I have also found that we do get more frequent updates when it comes to Retroid handhelds. With the pull down menu, it is familiar with the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus. It is basically the same experience. Some of my personal handy apps I like to use is that performance mode switcher, so then you can save battery when needed. That night mode is pretty handy if you're doing late night gaming sessions, and the screen recording with the device info is pretty handy. When it comes to the emulation side of things, you may already know what consoles this will be capable of doing so by reading those specs, which I mentioned earlier, which is the Sega Dreamcast and PSP. With consoles like the GameCube and the PlayStation 2, you are very limited with this capability. If you have picked up the 4GB version, you could get more titles that would run at a smooth frame rate. I chose the 3GB model as I already own the 3 Plus, which has the same specs but with that extra gigabyte of RAM, which can handle these little extra more games for the PlayStation 2 and GameCube with that widescreen feature. So the 3GB version, for my personal intended purpose of this handheld, it will just be fine for me, as the 3GB has more of enough RAM for a very quick responsive experience, with this functionality of using the OS and its features. All in all, I personally know that this handheld would do great. It's awesome for newbies to get into and current owners to have that better experience, with its big jump in build quality from its predecessor and its competition out there with that sweet price point and practical layout features and screen quality. This one is on a win-win. Well, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching, and if you could spare a quick minute on checking out my web store and the links below, that would be absolutely awesome. And I'll catch you lot on my next video.